Welcome back. In our last study, we discussed how Jesus entered in this area here and he healed a lot of people. He sat down and healed them. But if you put it together and you go back a little bit, he went from Tyre to Sidon. We'll get into that in the book of Mark. I believe it's in chapter 7. And then he probably went a little north. He went through Sidon, it says, or Sidon, and he came around here. So all this time, he's really with his disciples, and he avoided this Galilee area, especially Capernaum, because that was where the Pharisees are really getting mad at him, because he was kind of proving them wrong and telling the people, like, these are blind guys leading the blind and all that. And so it's just kind of a really sad story that Jesus actually had to pull away. He withdrew. But it seems like it was weeks of travel. So I think he took his time along here. We don't know exact route. Nobody does. But he took maybe weeks, and he's had a lot of solitary, like alone time with his disciples. Oh, would that have been cool to be able to hanging out with him, like with the disciples and all. I want to ask them later when I see them in heaven. Like, tell me about it, And so, he really took his time down here, and he came down here, and then he came into this section in the probably the southwestern part of the Sea of Galilee, and he's in Decapolis now. And so here he is. On this side instead of this side. So he seems to be very clearly among the Greek-speaking people and among the Gentiles and not among the Jews. And so he's here, and then, people are bringing him multitudes. We talked about how he healed lame and maimed and, the blind and deaf and all. So this is very, very cool. Really, really special time. People wondered about it, especially when the maimed were made whole, or pieces of their limbs weren't missing, and it actually projected out, and they could see it, a creative act of God, a miracle. He was doing miracles at this time. So he sat down. Now, while he was there, he evidently, when it talks about him sitting down, chances are he was teaching, rabbis taught. And so he just taught and taught and taught. It's kind of like going to a summer camp or something for a while, and for days or something. So what's interesting is that he had about 3 days they were hanging out with him, and they weren't really eating, or maybe they ate some, but they're running out of food or something. They ran, and Mark will mention that later, that they came from way far away. So probably way up here, and maybe Damascus over here. Maybe a few Jews heard about it, but mainly these Gentiles and Decapolis people. And so they were coming from far distances away from their homes. And now there was in this situation, about 4,000, rounded figures, 4,000 men, which besides the women and children, does that remind you of a story a while back? Remember the 5,000 men? And then what did he do? Do you remember? He fed the multitudes. That is what happens here. Again, Jesus does it twice. 2 different episodes. Some people, a lot of scholars like to put them together, but there's too many differences. 4,000 men, and he's sitting with them, and he's teaching them, and like they spent the night there. Think about it. These are kind of rough people, not softies in cities or something, like one writer suggested. These were not really soft people. They were tough. They were rugged. I mean, they slept on the ground with their cloaks over them to keep them from the dew of the morning and all that. And they are all, probably families are together. The single men went off to this one side, those single women, or maybe they hung out with some of the families and all. Whole families are together. There were children there were women. Who knows how many? It's possible 8,000, 10,000, 12,000. We don't know how many. Thousands of people were just hanging with him. I mean, wouldn't you want to go find out about this healer from Nazareth, and who's healing people remarkably and miraculously, big healings, not just, a cold or something, So here he is, he's there, and he's in that area, and he's teaching and he's preaching. And then what happens is they realize again, they're really hungry. Everyone's getting hungry. And among all the people there, he asked, to feed them. I mean, they said, Lord, what are we going to do with all these people? Doesn't that remind you of the time that he fed 5,000 men? And he said, he commanded everyone to sit down. He had everyone sit down. on the ground. This time it leaves out the green grass that was mentioned earlier. I think it was Mark. Mentioned earlier in the 5,000 when he fed them. So I think there's a little clue there that it's summer. The scorching heat had come, and it wasn't just green grass anymore. So this is like weeks and weeks later. And so they sat down on dry ground, and it was really hot and all during the day. And the green grass is gone. So this is at the summertime. And they were really fatigued and they were hungry. And the Bible says Jesus was moved with compassion. He was moved with compassion again on these multitudes. Very, very cool. So let me get my Bible here. And so he had them sit down, and he said, "What food do we have?" It says, and Jesus said, by the disciples said, how are we going to fill them in this wilderness? Now, the wilderness or the desert area doesn't mean sandy area, but basically it's an isolated area. I've kind of mentioned that before. So, it's a great multitude who, and Jesus said there, and Jesus said, how many loaves do you have? Like how many, what do you have? Loaves of bread. And by the way, if you remember before, bread and fish were a staple regular food in that area. Everybody ate bread and fish, especially poorer people. And this time they said 7 and a few little fishes. So I've got here kind of 7 loaves of bread. You can't probably count them, but there we have 1, 2, there's 3 underneath there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So here's the bread. And I don't know if you can see the fish there. I got 3 little fish. They had a few fishes. So here's one fish here. There's one fish, and then here's another fish here. Of course, these are really small. They were larger than that, probably as large as the loaves. And it says they were little fishes too. And they didn't have a lot of food here. So this time they had more fish and more bread, and yet Jesus fed less people. Did you hear what I just said? See, we just kind of pass over these things. He fed them with that amount. 10,000 people, maybe 12, 15,000. He fed them with that. Like, look at this plate right here. This is it. And so they took it and started handing them out. So they had baskets there. Like here's a basket right here. Let me get my basket here to pull it out. They had baskets, and I think what happened is the bread would come out like this. The bread would come out like, I'll show you. The bread would come out like this. Here's one for you. Here's one for you. Here's one for you. Oh, here's another one from you. Here's another one for you. Here's another one. Just, where's all that coming from? I love it. I want a replay of that when I go to heaven. So it just kept coming and coming and coming. There's no end of God's miracle power. And Jesus is really teaching the disciples a lot here. He decides to do it twice, maybe validate, make sure they know that, hey, you did it once, I did it once, I could do it again. And he could have done it 3, 8, 20,000 times. And that's the point. With God, all things are possible. And Jesus trusted in the Father. And again, by the way, he took it and break the bread and gave thanks. The word is he gave thanks to them, blessed God from heaven. And handed it to the disciples to do. That's kind of significant. He could have said, you disciples sit down and I'll do it. No, he wanted them involved in ministry. And that's a lesson for us today. You may feel like I can't do much to affect the world. No, you can't, but Jesus can. I can't either, but Jesus can. What you need to do is give him whatever you have, your talent, well, first start with your heart, your mind, your soul, your mouth, your tongue, your eyes, your ears, your hands, your feet, your body. Give him your past, your present, future. You just give him everything. And watch God work. And he'll make a difference through you in this world. You can make a difference in the world no matter what your age. And if you're older, let's say you're 80, 90, 100 right now, God can still make a difference with you. So that's just so powerful. This is a wonderful, wonderful story. It's a true story. It's not a fairy tale. And and what happened is they gave it to the multitude, and they ate, and they were full. All these people were full off of 7 loaves and a few fish. And it says, and they did eat and were filled, and they took up the broken food that were left, and they had 7 baskets full. Remember, last time it was 12, and I think this 12 had a significance to it. Number one, there were 12 apostles with him, but maybe it was a little bit more. 12 for the Jewish people. Here it's 7. Maybe it's an indication from the writer that these are Gentiles. Now, this is important. God is providing a banquet like he's going to provide in the kingdom of heaven in the future. He's already providing it for the Jewish people at one time. He's now doing it for the Gentiles. Maybe significant, maybe symbolic. And so that's what Jesus is doing. He's feeding all these Gentile people. Shows that God really loves everybody, not just the Jewish or chosen people. And they did eat, and it says they that did eat were 4,000 men besides children, women and children. And he sent away the multitude and took ship and came into the coast of Magdala. Now, it's not sure where that is, but it's possible that it's really talking about the place where the woman of Magdala lived. It's not clear. Mark uses a different name, which we'll get into it later. It's that region. But I think it's probably and possibly right there on that edge. The, what is that? Middle to north a little bit of the Sea of Galilee on the eastern side. See, this is the east and this is the west. Can you see the E and W there? So this is where he probably went, and he went right up there. Took a ship, probably went over there, borrowed a ship again or something. Went up there, and that's our next place that Jesus went. So now at that point, he's pretty well finished with the Gentile area. It's interesting. He was there for days, or at least 3 days for sure. Maybe he campaigned in there for a little while, which is very cool. Well, Jesus did it again. Our hero. No kidding. This is a true story. Imagine what that was like, really. Like they were hungry and now they're not hungry. He fed them while they are really isolated from their homes far, far away, a lot of them. And so how did he feed all those people? Because of the miracle power of God. And I would suggest that God is not only teaching those apostles, those disciples a lesson in God's provision, that God has everything that you need to do ministry. He does it for you and me too. That we need to remember these stories, take it to heart. Like you go, I don't know how we're going to get funds for this, or how are we going to get a building for this. When you get older, you're looking for, like what are we going to do? God provides. I've actually seen it in our lives now. But I just want to encourage you to remember the biblical stories to give you examples of what God can do. Amen? Thanks.